You guys see this guy on screen right here? Yes, this is you if you do not know how to find underrated anime. Finding hidden gems takes a little bit of finesse, but I'm gonna give y'all a freebie.
Let's make an unto.
This dumb little pottery show is the most underrated anime I've seen in a very long time, so allow me to explain why it's so peak, and how to find more sleeper hits just like it. Starting with what makes this show in particular work so well. Let's Make a Mug 2 so far is a thematically tight story with a strong sense of aesthetic and interesting character arcs. The story follows Himeno, a young girl who at first seemed to me like the default anime girl protagonist, super naive, somewhat clumsy, not particularly socially adept, but incredibly optimistic and determined. She quickly endeared herself to me though, as she began to find her way not only as a person, but as an artist. While this is a character-centric story with fairly layered and nuanced interactions, the most complex relationship in the show thus far has been that between Himeno and pottery. Her mother was a famous and talented pottery artist who unfortunately became so absorbed in her work that she ended up dying as a result of her obsession. Obviously, Himeno's father has a highly strained relationship with her interest in pottery, but remains supportive, inspired by the pure love his wife had for the craft. Growing up with a single parent is difficult, and as this story fits right into the coming-of-age timeframe, Himeno finally begins to learn about her mother through the pottery club and its members. For her, pottery is something of an indirect way to connect with her mother, and by extension, learn more about herself and where she comes from. This sparking her initial interest, though, doesn't mean it's where her fascination with pottery ends. Her father, being a struggling yet optimistic chef, has an appreciation for the way dishes frame his food. She wants to help her father in any way she can and create things for him. In both of these respects, her love for pottery comes off as incredibly family-oriented, as pointed out by her senpai. This is a beautiful thing and links directly into the tight-knit and traditional motifs of the Iyashikei genre. Iyashikei genre? What the hell is even that? You may be asking. Well, Iyashikei roughly translates to healing in Japanese, and is generally used to describe low-key, slice-of-life shows which soothe the viewer. They tend to lack major antagonistic forces, and paint the world in quite an optimistic light. Many of these stories take place along the Japanese countryside, emphasize a connection amongst tight-knit family or friends, and explore the beauty of nature. These factors aim to produce a humble and, most importantly, simple story that people interpret as highly soothing. It's anime for healing. It's the anime equivalent of a Philly cheesesteak, some weed, and a bitch to give you head. Truly blissful. This philosophy perfectly describes mug anime, as Himeno's mother herself credits the inspiration for some of her greatest works as trying to communicate through her art the beauty and love she feels when surrounded by nature. One of her sculptures with this philosophy sparks one of the most beautiful visual metaphors from the show, as Himeno goes to touch her mother's sculpture and is so enraptured by it that she sinks past the surface, nearly being absorbed into it. This is why I watch anime. Okay, not that, now, come on guys. Now? Really guys, now? Despite ironically lacking much natural talent in pottery, Himeno works as hard as she can to create something for her father, a replacement for one of her mother's bowls that he had always loved. Because her head ass, dropped it on the floor or something, I actually don't totally remember. She is incredibly excited to give it to him though, and he is likewise excited to receive it, seeing it of course as a token of love and appreciation, as well as a representation of the hard work he knows she went through to make it. However, while he appreciates the bowl for the fact that it is Himeno's, it doesn't seem to our heroine that he appreciates the bowl itself. This incredibly wholesome moment between father and daughter starkly followed by Himeno, all alone in her room, with only one thing running through her mind on repeat. He could never enjoy mine nearly as much. This is all part of Himeno's journey to realize that while her love for her family and friends and desire to make things for them is pure, pottery will only be fulfilling to her if she does it to please herself and realizes ideas that only she has, not as some sort of imitation of her mother or an attempt at pleasing others. Ironically, this is where she begins creating the pieces that others appreciate most, and her creativity begins shining through in her work. It isn't an overnight process that wins her an award or anything, but she deeply reaches just a handful of people with her art, which is around where our first season concludes. with a very unique dynamic as Himeno continues to learn about her mother and the virtues she can learn from her, whilst simultaneously making sure not to let the great expectations of her mother's genius and style put her in a box which sucks the joy out of pottery. Throughout the show so far, many other characters have been developed as well, most notably Hime Senpai, who has complex and varied interactions depending on who she's talking to, as well as a strong sense of established identity within the series. Club member Mika gets a full dream sequence episode in which we get to see the world through her eyes, which is a characterization method I've always loved. Hime's mother and father get fantastic development, and finally we have Nao-chan. This show is so impressive to me because of how much character work it gets done despite seemingly not trying too hard to rush anything. The series feels extremely candid and patient, regularly showing shots of the cicadas just buzzing and chilling, long scenes with little to no dialogue, and very naturalistic background noise. The OST is highly subdued, and the show opts for simply the natural, diegetic noises of nature, if any noise at all. This allows the viewer to really sit with the scene, feel out the emotions of it, and get to the headspace of the characters without having some backdrop influencing you to feel any type of way. It just doesn't feel like the show is going out of its way to impress you with beautiful presentation, but rather immerse you. So why don't people see this show for the beautiful and atmospheric piece that I see? Well, because art is subjective, but also I've narrowed it down to 3 main reasons. The first of which is its short episodes. Anime is almost universally divided up into 24-minute episodes, and deviations are quite rare. While longer episodes may get a fairer shake, there are barely any highly rated or popular anime with short episodes. While I'm not going to sit here and act like there's a bottomless treasure trove of peak fiction anime shorts, Onaragoro was good, Gauko-chan was good, I Can't Understand What My Husband's Saying was good, and this one was good. It's unwise to write off a show purely for its runtime. Which brings us to the second reason, which is the show's nature as Iyashikei, the dictionary definition of insignificant and missable. While a handful of well-respected Iyashikei absolutely exist, these types of shows are generally more quickly dismissed by the average viewer. The third and most glaring reason, though, is a bit more academic and subtle. Something slight that many people may not quite grasp if not highly media literate. Just kidding. Ain't nobody give a shit about pottery. I think learning about something niche from a show is interesting personally. Hell, my favorite anime is about a Japanese variant of chess, but most people hear that it's a show about pottery and have thoughts along the lines of, well, this literally never crosses my mind ever. Who cares if it stays that way? It's not that I don't respect this viewpoint, but it does fly in the face of the number one thing you can do to find underrated anime. Seek out the niche. This is a show made by and for an incredibly small portion of the anime viewer base, and as such, it lends itself to appealing to those it appeals to very strongly at the expense of widespread acceptance. More risky, specialized shows will always have a chance to speak to you personally, and the massive number of them is frankly one of the more interesting things about anime. It really is so perfect. Himeno's arc about not trying to appeal to others, but embracing the niche and truly connecting with a few people along the way organically is perfectly mirrored by this show's philosophy and place within the pantheon of anime. At least in my eyes. Beautiful. So don't give up hope. Good anime is not dead. Go out there and find some weird, underrated Iyashikei shit that you vibe with. It's probably out there. While when a show like this one comes along that isn't trying to impress you, there's a good chance that it won't, it's always possible that it'll just organically click for you. This show clicked for me when I first heard the opening, a fairly standard anime song, but sung by all 4 of the main characters' voice actresses, a beautiful testament to the communal and tight-knit relationships these characters share. Relationships that I, in some ways, felt like I was really there for. I can't wait to watch the sequel, Let's Make a Mug 2 and the dental hygiene spin-off that can only be viewed in a Japanese dentistry app and has no users on my anime list. Wow. Thank you so thankin' much to my patrons. B, Sumgoon, Karta, Trey, Hermit's Nook, Funky Boy Haas, and Artemis Locke. I really appreciate the support, and it means the world to me. And yes, this perfectly thematically fits as a follow-up to my previous dating apps video. I'm on a roll!